Hello, good evening, everybody. Welcome back to the webinars that we're doing with the ADI and JSC. And this evening, we're doing a discussion on motorways. It's a bit of a topic at the moment with forthcoming changes possibly ahead. So we thought it'd be a good idea to do a motorway discussion. And to help on the panel tonight, we've got Lynn Barry, our chairman for ADI and JSC, and our vice president, Nick Ibbott. Yeah, good evening.
Hello.
Good evening, everybody. I hope you enjoy what you have come to listen to and participate in.
Thanks, Nick. And just to briefly recap on the GoToWebinar control panel, on the control panel on the right-hand side, there's a few options of different things. You can put your hand up, or you can ask questions. Down the right-hand side, there's an area where you can ask questions as we go along. Feel free to put any questions in that you've had. The more discussion we get, the more you'll learn. And it's good to get some interaction from you guys. So type away and we'll get as many questions asked and answered as possible. We'll aim to finish for at the latest 9 o'clock, so we'll be running for around about an hour. If we finish earlier, we'll do 3/4 of an hour maybe, and we'll see how time goes on there. So keep the questions coming in, and I'm going to hand over to Lynn to kick us off, and we'll change on to there. Lynn, over to you.
Okay, well, we've already mentioned some of the reasons for doing this webinar. We're probably closer than we've ever been to getting learners onto motorways, although it's not here yet. It does seem like it is going to be a possibility. So we're thinking of it from that point of view, but not only that, of course, we can take them onto motorways as part of tuition once they've passed their test. The other reason behind this, something that I did a few months back at my own local association, where I'm not in charge of the association, I just go along as one of the ADIs that are there. Our chairman actually broke us into groups, about 4 or 5 of us, 4 or 5 in a group and about 5 groups. And he asked us to come up with ideas for what we train concerning motorways, what sort of things would include, and how we went about doing motorway tuition. And some people, when we started, were a little bit, well, why are we doing this? We do it anyway. It's just a straight line. What is there to learn? But once we got into it, 20, 25 minutes later on, and then we all discussed it, we realised that actually we were all teaching it in quite different ways, and it gave us a lot of food for thought to see how some people were actually doing it. The other thing at the moment is that NAS, the National Association Strategic Partnership, are starting to develop and have already been doing this, giving some guidelines for motorway tuition. If these are wanted, and hopefully they will be, we can put them on the website. That's the idea. Now, I think that the idea behind it is not to try telling ADIs what they already know. It's just to give new ideas. And I meet a lot of ADIs who actually say to me that they never go near a motorway. I've met ADIs who have actually been frightened to come to me for training because, quote, they've never driven on a motorway. So there are clearly some ADIs out there who do need some help, and if they do, then great, because it would be a set of guidelines that they could find useful. And I'm all for keeping up skills, and in fact I think we could all learn more, because motorways change, rules and regulations and things that are happening on motorways are changing so much. I know going on some of the new smart motorways, that I've learned a lot there about things that I've seen happening on there. So it's ever changing and evolving. That's why the guidelines are being produced. So hopefully they will be available at some stage on the NAS website, and you will be able to look at those as well if you want some extra help. Thanks, Ed.
Thank you, Lynn. And the next one.
Slide, isn't there?
Yeah,
so what we're looking at then, is how to train on motorways, whether we do train on motorways or not. PAS Plus and using it as part of PAS Plus. Active traffic management, looking at slip roads, overtaking, what happens if you break down on a motorway, which can be a bit of a scary experience, and just the business sense behind it. How can we bring this in and actually make some money out of training people on motorways and giving them value for money?
Right, lovely.
Thanks, Ed.
Thanks, Lynn. And just before we go forward any further on this one, what we've got is we've got some polls here. If everybody just wants to have a quick read of the polls that we've got on there, I'm going to put each one up individually, so there's no need to type in the question box. There will, on your control panel, if you've got your control panel open on the right-hand side, there should be an area where it'll come up and you should be able to then take part in this poll. So the first one I'm going to launch now is there. So how far is it to your nearest motorway? Less than 5 miles, less than 10 miles, less than 25 miles, or more than 25 miles? If everybody would like to just take part in that one, wow. The bottom one is starting to go up now. Yeah. So 76% voted, 82% voted now. Sort of settled down at 82%. Does anybody want to vote? Got any more votes? No. Okay. So that's come in now at quite staggering figures here. 56% live less than 5 miles away from a motorway. Wow. I wouldn't have thought that would be as high as that. 22% less than 10 miles, 11% less than 25, and more than 25 miles is 11% also. That's 85% people voted. So thanks for that. Thank you very much. Okay, so we'll close that poll. And we'll just open the second poll. And with this one, it's just a very simple... Oh no, got the wrong one there. That one, KSIs. That one. And what percentage of all KSIs happen on motorways? Do we think 4%, 6%, 8%, or 9%? This is on all roads as well, all types of roads. Right. Okay, we're coming up to 82%, 85% voted now. And I think that's where we peaked out last time. It must include us in this one, to be stopping at 85%. So 54% of you think it's 4%, 32% think 6%, 11% 8%, and 4% think it's 9%. And the correct answer there is 4% of KSIs happen on motorways. So well done, 54% of you. Yeah. And we'll close that one. And we'll just go to this one. So out of all the KSIs, the figures, what percentage of all KSIs are fatalities on motorways? Select one of the following: 3%, 5%, 10%, 25%. This one's going backwards and forwards a little bit. It's interesting to see these figures going up. 78% voted, one or two more to still vote. 84%, nearly everybody voted now. Okay, right, and we've got the results in now. And we have there 32% think 3%. Oh, it's just changed. 31% think 3%. 38% think 5%, which is the correct answer. 5% is the correct answer. 24% think 10%, and 7% of you think it was 25% of the fatalities happen on motorways. So just to recap there, the correct answer there was 5%. Quite interesting on those stats there. And a final one. How many of you actually train on motorways? Select one of the following. Do you actually train or coach on motorways? Either yes or no. (85%, 88%). So settled out there. Quite high. 70% of everybody online. Oh, just changed again. 67% of everybody online thinks that does train online, and 33% don't train on motorways. Right. Okay, so those are the 4 polls that we had to start with. Interesting to see those. Thank you very much for taking part in those. That's quite interesting seeing all that. We'll have a record of that on there. So when you, I don't know how that will come up when we review. We'll have to see when we actually play this back how much of that comes up on the actual playbacks. Whether you can get back in, guys, to see that again. If not, what I'll try and do is get that out. I've got everybody's email addresses. If anybody wants those stats emailing through, can you just type into the question box below, send me the poll figures, and I'll be able to just pull those together and email out to those that want it. So if anybody that wants those poll figures, just type into the question box and I can send those out. Okay, right, just going to move on. Right, so the next slide, oh, that was the call coming up in the wrong order for some reason. Okay, and we're going on to Nick, training on motorways.
Right. Benefits of training on motorways then, yeah. We can see then that 67% of you do train on motorways, which I think is great. I was wondering why the other 33% don't. Is that because you're part of the 11% that are more than 25 miles away? So it would be either cost prohibitive or the time factor. That would be interesting if you could type that into the box in the little right-hand corner, yeah? So that we can have some feedback on that. Personally, I think motorway training or coaching is essential. I think for those of you, and certainly the 67% that do training and coaching on the motorway, you obviously see a great value in it. And some of the motorway driving is pretty abysmal, and I think we do need to equip our newer drivers for the hazards of driving on a motorway. I was saying to Lynn and Ed before we came on that as in Hertfordshire, where I live, we have more motorway than any other county, and therefore we have the higher volume of traffic than any other county. So I suppose that's why it's so passionate to me and some of my colleagues in St Albans District Association that we do motorway training. The M1, of course, one of the first bits of motorway. So you can't really go anywhere particularly well without going on a motorway, unless of course you're going to use it tonight, because they've just shut the M25 at the Dartford crossing, and that will be closed for the rest of the night. So that will be great fun for anybody that lives in that area. So have fun. Scenarios. One of the things I do, and I know Ed was saying the same thing, if you've got your students and why they want to use the motorway, you've probably encouraged them to take a motorway lesson, but as in coaching, you should ask them what their desires and needs are to go on a motorway, and what their fears, anxieties, if they have any, and if they have friends, relations, or a need to travel on motorway. It might be for work. Now they've got a car, they could get a company car. They might have friends, relations, need to travel on the motorway. So one of the good things is, where would you have to go? How far? How would you plan that journey? Would you consider any stops? Have you looked on a map? I'm afraid I'm a bit old-fashioned. You could look on a sat-nav, but to my mind, a sat-nav doesn't necessarily show you that long distance that you're going to travel and where the service areas are. But we live in a modern age, and I'm not saying I don't use sat-nav. So things like that, planning where to stop, it's emphasising that as a new driver, and any driver for that matter, shouldn't drive for more than about 2 hours. It can be stressful, especially if it's in and around our area here, M25, M4, M1, A1M even can get congested. So that can be very tiring, because you're sitting there, especially if you're in a manual car and you stop, start, which most of the time the M25 is. So any comments from anybody of any scenarios or things that they do when they're doing their training with their students? Ed or Lynn, you
Yeah.
want to?
All I'd say, Ed, is that a sat nav I was using at the weekend actually, as I'm going along the motorway, it shows me how many miles to the next services and what's actually at the next services, and a little teacup comes up to show me where I can have a drink.
Right.
One of the things
Taking.
I
Yeah,
do,
yeah, go on.
yeah, one of the things I do, Nick, when I'm doing motorway training, and that's why the word scenarios is on great access to the whole of the UK, is that instead of giving normal directions to a pupil, I'll ask them if they are going maybe to university or have got friends and family that live at a distance away, and we'll actually get them to plan a journey to go to somewhere. So we build a proper scenario into it, which gives them more of a realistic drive, and it moves away from then like the normal training session. It gives them a purpose for the journey. So you actually then start to challenge them on the GDE matrix, so the purpose of the journey, and get them to look at themselves and think about when they'll do this journey, how they would carry it out, building in those stops and everything like that. So you can really build the GDE matrix into this really easily.
And particularly how long it might take them to travel that journey. I mean, they see mum, dad, or whoever bombing along at 80 plus mile an hour, and they do it in half the time. They're probably not hopefully going to be going those sort of speeds, and it may take them therefore longer, although not a lot longer, believe it or not. So it is important that they understand how far that journey is. And of course, yes, you're right, Ed. If you key it into a sat nav and have your start point and your finish point, it normally will tell you roughly how long. I thought you were going to say, Lynn, that on your sat nav it also tells you what traffic delays there are, because on mine it will tell me what traffic problems there are and may even take me off the motorway on a different route.
Yeah,
so, which is great, really. I mean, it comes up as on one that I was at the weekend, it comes up with a red line when it's blocked and yellow line when it's starting to get congested, green when it's flowing. So all of that's really useful.
Yes, mine does the same thing, yeah. So, and again, then you're going to say to these people, are you going to be using sat nav? Some of them might even use their phones because they've got good Google Map, or there are other maps available, I'm sure. But if they use Google Maps and these other apps that will tell them of the traffic situation, and as you said, where the nearest service points are. And if you had an electric car, that could be very important to you. If you're traveling along an electric car, you need to know where the next electric plug-in point is. So yeah, but I think the distance, knowing the distance and knowing how long it will take is an important factor. And of course, the time of the day. Were they going to set off in rush hour? Are they going to go at night? Is it going to get dark? Have they checked the weather before they've set off to see what the weather conditions are? As we know, it's turned very cold now. We've hit the minus button on the old temperature. I don't know what it's like when you're neck of the woods, anybody, but yeah. So that can have a great effect. And of course, if they went further north, and I'm only saying that because I live so far south, the weather could be far worse. It could have snow blizzards, which we don't really get much in our county down here unless it's seriously bad, and that could have a knock-on effect. Big juggernauts. Climbing hills could get stuck.
Yeah,
so
we have
this time.
Sorry, Nick. We have the highest motorway in the UK, not far away from us. And I can't remember, is it 1,300 metres at the top of Saddleworth Moor? And that can get really blocked off with snow. I've come back from skiing holiday once, and it took us about 3 hours to get home, which is normally an hour and a half drive. And it was horrendous drive on the motorway. So it can get pretty serious with the weather conditions.
Yeah, so advice is then make sure you have a blanket, warm clothing. I had a young lady come out today. She only had a jumper on, and I said, you really ought to have a coat if we ran out of fuel. Just as a scenario, got puncture or something happened to the car, you're going to be standing there freezing cold. You should have a coat. So advise your students that they should have a coat if they're traveling at this time of the year, even a blanket and water, believe it or not. People think because it's cold they don't need a drink, but actually when it's cold they do need to drink water because they'll dehydrate even in cold weather. people have, we're lucky in this country, but people abroad have been known to die in their vehicles because they've died of the cold.
Nick, we've got quite an interesting point to come across here. If people are using mobile phones, which we ought to just bring up as well to everybody else, if the learner's using the mobile phone as a sat nav, the instructors should have enough knowledge to ensure that the learner knows what's legal, what isn't, with the use of that. And that goes for any electrical device, whether it is on a mobile phone or even if it's a sat nav mobile unit in your car. You've got to choose when and where and how you're going to program these things in.
Yes, yeah.
Yep, that's a good point.
Yes, that's true. And again, I mean, with the new driving test coming in, whenever next year now, obviously, a lot of sat, well, 50% of the driving tests will be on sat nav. So one would like to think they're a little bit clued up, but yeah, their mobile phone, where they put it, is it's visible, how much they're touching it, all these things. Yes, and I mean, distraction. There's so many people now running in the back of one another. Sadly, for using their phone. There was that sad case only a few weeks ago where the truck driver, and he wasn't on a motorway, 50 mile an hour, just ploughed in the back of everyone, because he was scrolling through his music bank just to see what different music he could listen to, and looked up. 7 seconds later, he's ploughing it in the back and wiped out a complete family, unfortunately.
Yeah.
And they're the sort of things that we need to make sure that our new drivers don't get involved in these sort of collisions. So I'm sure somewhere in our thing this evening we've got about tailgating. Yes, there you go. Yeah.
Yeah, we've got another slide next, I think.
Yeah. So safest roads in the UK. So although we have been talking about all that doom and gloom, they are still one of the safest places to actually travel.
Yes, they are. But then you'd also say, okay, they are the safest per vehicle mile. But when there is a crash, often the crashes are worse than in a 30 mile an hour limit. Let's just say, as a rule.
Yeah.
And tailgating is probably one of the worst things of all.
Yes.
Yes, if you're going to do it in the pupil's own car, then you must make sure that they are insured. It's fully insured to cover their own car going on the motorway and for themselves. I've had quite a few pupils just recently, and they've all had black boxes fitted to their cars. So and they've all said, it's been helpful, even though they get sort of like people tooting at them when they're doing 30 and a 30 limit. It's sad, but there you go. So yes, making sure that the insurance, and really as instructors, we ought to see that insurance. I know in the driving test, all the pupil has to do is sign the top left-hand corner of the form, but your duty as an instructor should be to look at that insurance certificate, make sure it's okay, because if there's anything serious went wrong, and it doesn't have to be their fault, does it?
No, it doesn't. One of the things that I've done is ask them to phone their insurance company, then give permission for me to ask questions to the insurance company. One of the things I always ask is the insurance up to date and paid up in full? Because it's important to know that, because so many people might bring their insurance certificate, but you see it on the police programs where they can pay for 1 month, cancel the direct debit, and still keep the insurance certificate. So I always ask that it's paid in full and all up to date. So let me get rid of that. So that's an important one to ask the insurance.
Right, but then as you say, Ed, because of data protection, you'd have to get permission.
Yes, I get the pupil phones the insurance company, and the pupil gives permission to the insurance company to talk to me. And that's worked so far, and I've had nobody, no insurance companies have said no, they won't speak to me, and I've had no pupils say, no, I'm not ringing them. I think if the pupil said, no, you're not ringing them, I think I'd seriously question whether they've got insurance then.
Yes, quite.
Just moving on to the next slide. For some reason, it's coming up in the wrong order, Lynn. Lynn, over to you. Thanks for that one, Nick. Yeah, the driver.
If you get the rest of those up as I start talking, then I'll remember what I'm talking about. That's it.
There you go.
Right, the driver. Well, we've already mentioned some of these bits, but obviously the things we've got to think about is the driver themselves. when they've not been on motorways before, it can be a nervous time. We can get anxious drivers. I mean, I know full licence holders who will go most places, but they will not use motorways. They are just terrified of the thought. So really, for training on motorways, you're going to help make people more confident to understand the motorway more. They need to understand as well some of the sort of feelings and emotions that they might start to get if they do start to get anxious and nervous. How the body sort of starts to feel, the fact that they might go sweaty or get sort of clammy hands, or start to almost feel a little bit like their breathing rate is altering. They need to be able to sort of recognise these sorts of things and have some sort of scenarios and ways in which they can help themselves, and that will help by having training as well on the motorway. Fatigue, because obviously if they are tired or they're not feeling 100%, it can have a big effect on how they're feeling when they're driving on the motorways. The effect of what you could call red mist and getting sort of carried along there along with everybody else, and the sensation of the speed and just getting totally carried away. And again, how that would feel and recognising that. So you can see here that feelings, emotions are all coming into this. I can remember the first time I drove on motorways, actually, how I felt and feeling quite, I don't think they were as busy then as they are now, but feeling quite anxious because it was something I hadn't done before and I hadn't really thought how different it would feel. And also things like peer pressure. I've trained people who've passed a test. One lad who then told me that 2 days later he was taking, quote, all his friends on holiday in the car, and when I asked him where he was going and what his route was, it was clear he was going on the motorway. You know, and his attitude was, well, it'll be all right, Lynn, it's just the same as the dual carriageways and we've done a lot of those. Actually, it's quite different, and we chatted about it for a while, but it did concern me that he was going to do that quite so soon after he'd passed. So obviously we need to discuss with them how it feels to be the driver, having passengers in the car, and the effect of all these things, including the peer pressure. Using a roof board or P-plates. Now, obviously we're only going to be using a roof board if we actually get learners on motorways, and if we do, then we will need to think about using a roof board and the strength of those magnets. Even in high winds, it might be quite dangerous to use a roof board. And I noticed last year when we had one, well actually this year in the summer, when we had one really hot day, that even on the dual carriageways there was a rattle in my car that I hadn't heard before, and when I thought about it, it was actually the roof time, and it's never happened before, but it was an extremely hot day, and when I looked into it, it's because the magnets are obviously weaker in heat. So if it was very hot, that's something else we might have to consider. But really, if we're going out at the moment with a full licence holder, then we don't want a headboard on. What I've always done when I've done motorway training is to put motorway tuition signs across the back of the car or on the sides of the car for when we've stopped service areas, etc. But certainly that would allow people to know, if you wanted them to know, and you could use P-plates, but you've got to be careful that they're strong ones which are going to stay on there, and nothing that's too flimsy. But otherwise you wouldn't really want your headboard on there if we teach it with full licence holder. The whole point is that they are seen to be just like any other driver there.
Most headboard companies will only guarantee the headboard to 70 miles an hour anyway. Yeah. Not that you should be going quicker than that, but yes, you're quite right, Lynn. I mean,
high wind would make a difference there, wouldn't it?
Yeah, well, that downdraft off LGVs when you go past them, and you put their high winds. But I mean, that suction going past a juggernaut could, if you haven't got strong magnets on your headboard, yeah, if you were, and you're quite right, Lynn. We're thinking ahead here that when we start getting learners on motorways, heaven forbid. I'm all for it, but I still don't know how we're going to do it. Yes, that's something we have to think about, or just an L plate. But with regard to the P plates, I'll be honest, personally, I'm not a lover of them whatsoever. And you only need one, and you only need one on the back. And it's not a good idea at higher speeds to have one on the front
No.
anyway, just like L
No.
plates. They do
Yeah.
disappear, no matter how good the magnets are.
Yeah.
So, yes.
Yeah.
I think your idea, Lynn, of saying I have a little sign, magnetic sign that says Motorway Training or Motorway Tuition, I think that's good. But,
it's quite big. It just goes across the back of the car, but I mean, all cars are designed differently, so it's just wherever, what size you...
The letters are about 1 metre high, so that it can be seen from 2 seconds back, so that people don't have to tailgate behind you to get up to read it.
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. Okay, the length of the training, which we've already sort of covered that, so planning the journey and suitable brakes.
Suitable brakes, just thinking about suitable brakes, and then where you might be stopping and pulling in on a service area. I know you do that a lot, don't you, Nick, when you're doing motorway training?
Yeah. But I think it's essential that they learn how to come off. It's the high speed that you come off. It's not like a slip road or deceleration lane. A lot of times, there might be a sign saying 20 mile an hour, and from coming from 70 right down to 20, I usually kid them and say, you think you could get out and walk quicker, but I wouldn't advise it. Wait till the car stops. But it is a surprise to them, and that sudden loss of speed and momentum, and planning coming off as well. When to signal, when to lift off, what the traffic in front's doing, what's behind you, and exit. We all travel up and down the country a lot doing our workshops, and I've gone into motorway service areas that I'm not familiar with, and I'm thinking, how do we get out of here? So they can be complicated places to leave. Yeah.
Right, just before we move on to the next one, Andrew has come up with quite an interesting one. This is obviously something from, I would think it'd be available to everybody. It's some statistics here. What's interesting is the comment about driving is poor on motorways. The latest DFT figures show that only 46% of cars and vans exceed the speed limit in free-flowing traffic on motorways. Compared to in 2011, it was 49%, so it's dropped. I wonder if that's with a lot more of the smart motorways having speed cameras on them. In 30 mile an hour zones, 54% of people exceed the speed limit, and 84% of people exceed the speed limit in 20 mile an hour limits. So that's quite. I thought it'd be quite high on 20. Yeah, it is. Thanks for that, Andrew.
And Mike Penning, when he was Transport Minister, said he wanted to raise the speed limit of motorways to 80, but he then said the downside of that, folks, is if I do that, I will put in a lot more 20 mile an hour speed limits. Well, of course, he moved sideways from his job and was sent over to Northern Ireland, and the next minister didn't have the same ideas as he did, but somewhere along the line we got a lot more 20 mile an hour speed limits, and we didn't get any 80 mile an hour on the motorways. So yeah, and the police, to be honest, certainly around here wouldn't do anything if you're doing 75, even 76 on the motorway. They won't even look at you.
Yeah. Don't think we should be promoting that one too much.
No,
but I'm saying, that we're talking about people exceeding the speed limit.
Yeah.
You come down at 80 in the fast lane.
Yes.
Is quite normal. Yeah, if you try and do 65, you look like you've stopped.
Right. Okay. Pass Plus, building a motorway tuition into the package of Pass Plus. Obviously, it's one of the modules in the Pass Plus package, and it can be integrated into the training quite nicely through different things. Building on the dual carriageways, because the dual carriageways is part of one of the modules as well. Covering the weather conditions is quite an important one. This is stuff that we can build into our normal motorway training as well. Some of these modules that are in here, because the weather conditions, obviously, we've talked about the snow, can be quite bad sometimes. But you get low sun. That's a real bad one at the moment. We've had a really clear day today, crystal clear skies. It's been gorgeous, but the sun has been an absolute pain. And if you're going southbound into that sun with this low light and on a wet surface as well, that can be really blinding sometimes if you get the bounce back. So talking about maybe the use of sunglasses, but then you've got to build into that if they are using sunglasses. What would they do if they got to the Dartford Tunnel and they've got sunglasses on? Then they would have to take their sunglasses off at that point. So building in things like that. Come on, why aren't we
When
working?
you say sunglasses, they'd have to have prescriptive sunglasses if they're needing glasses to drive by. So
Yes, I'm a bit sneaky when I'm driving. Mine flip up down ones, so they over clip onto these, so that if I do, because I used to do a lot of driving abroad and down the west coast of Italy, you're in and out of tunnels all the time.
yeah.
So I used to have the flip up lens ones, and they were quite handy. You could just flick them up and down. But yes, it's a good point. Nighttime driving. Because it is different when you get onto nighttime. Judging the speed and distance of vehicles is totally different when it comes dark. So that can have quite an effect, and especially if it's raining as well. We've had some pretty heavy rain. I don't know about you guys, but up here in Yorkshire, we've had some horrendous weather just lately with driving rain, and you get that on some of the motorways, and the spray coming off the HGVs is really bad. So with that, be thinking about the lighting, getting some discussions going, because not all the time if we've got a really nice day like we've had today, talking about these sort of things and getting some discussion going with the learners, especially when you're having your coffee break at the because when I do motorway training, I go out for 3, 4, even 6 hours sometimes, and build in some length of journeys. So these good discussions and how you deal with other road users, because that comes into what Lynn was just talking about a little bit since, and the red mist. Because if you get somebody driving down a motorway and somebody cuts in too early, or you're going down and they go for an overtake without checking the blind spot, and you just happen to be in their blind spot at that point, how you react to something like that, and how you then might monitor how you're feeling, so that you can get some good discussions with your pupils talking about. Did you want to come in there, Lynn? Did you put your hand up?
No,
Oh,
sorry.
right, no, right. Okay, just
Looking,
saw it out of the
very
eye corner
intelligent
there. So yeah,
What not to do if you're teaching an emergency stop.
yeah, exactly. Um, so that all comes in with the journey planning there, building that in. I like to build that journey planning, as I said earlier, into when I'm doing Pass Plus, and take some of this stuff out of the Pass Plus modules if you're doing ordinary training without the Pass Plus, because not everybody wants to pay for it, or do the Pass Plus and do the whole of the extra hours. So I take a lot of Pass Plus modules and put those into motorway driving, because there's lots of useful stuff in there that you can transfer across. And that's it. Has anybody, anything to comment on that one? Go back a slide, just put that up. Lynn or Nick?
No,
No.
no, don't think so.
no, I need to say lights that whatever time of the year they should check their lights and have a walk around the car, making sure all their brake lights are working. I'm sure you guys, the same as me, see the number of vehicles driving around with dodgy lights. I like pointing it out to my learners when we're going around in the dark these days. What's wrong with the car coming towards you? Oh, the light's out. 2 cars later, what's wrong with the car coming towards you? Oh, the light's out. 4 cars later, what's that coming towards you? Oh, the light's. Oh my goodness, this lady said, I didn't realise there were so many cars with faulty lights. So I immediately say, and how often should you check your lights? What sort of answers do you guys get? I'll tell you in a minute what I get. What do you normally get? What sort of answer when you ask that, if you ask that question? How often do you check your lights?
Varies so much. Some people don't even think to check the lights.
No.
No, I would never check them, is often an answer, but sometimes a month, month,
Yeah.
month,
A month,
quite
a
often.
week.
Yeah,
So I say to him, that guy checked his lights this morning, so he's not going to check them again until Tuesday morning, so he's going to drive the rest of the week like that. Then the penny drops on them, yeah? And then I say, my car's got a complete set of spare bulbs for every single light on the car. And I'm disappointed that the other week I was at the test centre, it was dark, there was another learner car in there, won't name the company, but quite a large school. Light was out on the car. I went over and said to him, you realise the light's out? Oh yeah, it's been like that for a few days. I said, what? I said, "Are you going to replace it?" "Oh yeah, but they're awkward to get to. Same car as what I had." And I said, "Well, you can do it in 5 minutes. Just put it." "Oh yeah, but I've got quite fat fingers," he said, "and I can't get my hand down there." He said, "I'll go later in the week and go to Halfords and get them to do it. There are other companies out there other than Halfords that will do it for you." I found that disgusting, that he's with a learner driver and knowing that his headlight was out. If he was one of our association members, I'd have gone to the back of my car and given him the bulb and even fitted it for him and given him a lesson and the pupils on how to do it and how quick it would take. But being as he wasn't, I couldn't be bothered if you're going to take that attitude. So
Yeah.
let that be a lesson. Don't meet me with a headlight out unless you know me well.
Just going to come in with one or 2 points that we've got on the questions here. We mentioned the fast lane. You brought up the fast lane, Nick. What do you call the lanes on motorways?
I call them lane 1, 2, and 3. But I can tell you from the Better Driving book, if you want me to. This book, a little bit in here, and it says when motorways. Do you want me to say this now?
Yeah, go on.
All right. It said in the earlier days when motorways first came out, they referred to it as the slow lane, middle lane, and fast lane. Unsurprisingly, lots of people still consider that, and it's taken us years to get the media and like motoring people and the radio and TV to stop calling it that. I call it lane 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5 because we have 5 lanes. In fact, down by Heathrow, we've got 6 lanes, if I'm not mistaken. And it's sad that that sort of stuck. It's a bit like a Skoda, isn't it? I mean, Skodas are brilliant cars these days, but you talk to anyone my age or even older, and they'll laugh at you if you mention the word Skoda. So this business of fast lane, slow lane, cruising lane, it is a shame. And I was actually, sadly, looking through the highway code because I'm convinced there used to be a bit in there that said there was no fast lane. But I might be mistaken. It might be in the driving essential skills book. I'll have a look later before I go to bed. So that's where this expression sadly comes from. And so, yes, we have the people that get in that right-hand lane. I join the M1 quite frequently. There's 4 lanes, and you've got people in front of you, and they go straight to lane 3.
Yeah.
And there's nothing in lane 1 and 2, and you think, why have you done that?
Yeah.
So, yes, it is strange, but no, I never refer to. I always say the fast lane is the one in the left. When I drove Parv back from the conference that we successfully had, was it this month? Earlier this month? Yeah. I drove Parv back down towards Watford, and we probably stayed in the left lane most of the journey, and it was quicker. Yeah, and she called the people in the right-hand lane the dabbers because they're always on and off the brake. I thought that was a great expression. So yes, you know what I'm like. I will throw that in as fast lane, even though I don't seriously believe it. And anyone who I'm training on the motorway, who are their PDIs or whatever, and they make that comment or ask them where it is, I say I've never found it in all the years. What I say is, what's the speed limit in lane 1? So they tell me. What's the speed limit in lane 2? So they tell me. What's the speed limit in lane 3? So they tell me. I say, well, which one's the fast lane? And I haven't worked that out.
Yeah.
Did ask.
Before we start this, you mentioned you've got the clock. It's 45 really.
Lynn, sorry, can you just turn your head slightly so you'll pick up your microphone better?
Yeah, Ed, I wanted to remind you it's 49 because you said you had no clock where you were.
Right, okay, thank you. Moving on. Smart motorways, Nick.
Yes, in our area, we were probably the first in the country to start getting smart motorways. I think the people that use the motorways a lot, like that tanker driver in that picture there, he would probably tell you that they don't work very well because all it does is pushes the queue of the traffic 2 miles further back down the motorway. In so much as stopping rear-end shunts, I would say yes, they work. And it's sad that you have to have that sign up there that says hard shoulder for emergency use only with a big red cross, and they advertise frequently on the radio. Do you know what that big red cross means? And it's sad that we have to actually educate people using motorways that don't go in that lane unless that cross is out. Yeah, I don't have a problem with smart motorways. You have got to be careful though, because people have been caught where the speed limit changes. So that overhead gantry sign they're saying 40. Let's say it said 60, and then just as you reach it, it dropped to 40, and you're going through the camera. People have been caught on that before now, which is a little unfair, really. Also, people need to realise, and I can't remember the title of the camera, there are cameras not just on those overhead gantry signs, but there are cameras now to the left of those gantry signs, and they can be switched on all the time. They don't have to be on when they're on, and they can scan. They're digital, and they scan every lane.
Right.
So.
Yeah. There was just one point on the overheads. I know when they did the M62 round near Manchester, there was quite a few motorists getting caught with what you just exactly said there, where they changed the speed limit. And what they've done now, so we've been reliably informed by the police, is that there's a delay on the speed cameras now. So once they go from, say, national speed limit down to 60, 40, whatever, there's a delay on the cameras of about a minute or 3 minutes. I can't remember what exactly it is, but I know there's a delay before they start taking pictures.
Yep.
The only issue that I've got is that I'm looking for something that no hard shoulder, only because hard shoulder.
Lynn, can I just stop you there? Because you're really quiet.
Okay, I haven't changed anything. Is that better?
All right, yeah. It's just you're sitting just maybe a little bit far away. The speaker microphone's not quite picking you up.
Okay, is that working now?
Yeah,
is that better?
That's it.
Okay. Yeah. So travelling with a van in front of me that was losing his load because the straps were coming loose, and he obviously realised this, and he was trying to pull over into what would be the hard shoulder, but trying to pull over into it, he was giving all sorts of signals, left signals, hazard lights. Lots of vehicles were just not realising what he was trying to do. So I do think that there is some issue with these smart motorways where you have no hard shoulder until somebody actually pulls over into it, and then all the wording on the gantries changes, and you have stopping places every half a mile or so, or however often they are. But he was having a real issue at getting over.
Yeah, I think on this picture, actually, on the very left-hand side corner, you can just see the end of one of these stopping places. I know they do have them, but that's no good if you're in an HGV and you get a puncture or a car. No. It's very hard to travel on to those areas. So yeah. So recognise that we're running on for time here. Let's move on, Nick, to just talking a little bit about the slip roads. And which I noticed you earlier, you said slip roads, but then used the word deceleration lane. What was the reason you brought the word deceleration lane in as well? We were discussing this earlier, actually, weren't we?
Yeah, well, it does actually say in the highway code, in brackets, slip roads. But I've always thought of it as a deceleration lane or an acceleration lane. Although if you're joining the N25, how much you could accelerate is debatable. Yes, and deceleration lane. There's that lovely story about this little old lady who kept getting hit in the back. This is a true story, So this happened about 3 times, and in the end, the insurance company said, "Look, you need some further training because you keep getting hit in the back as you're coming off the motorway." So she went out with this instructor, and she changed to 3rd gear at the 3rd countdown marker and 2nd gear at the 2nd countdown marker. And he said, "What are you doing?" She said, "I thought that was telling me to slow down and where I should be changing gear." And so she kept getting hit in the back. That's actually true. Wasn't me. And so yes, advise them to, obviously depending on speed and flow of traffic, but lift off when they've come off the onto the deceleration lane. And of course the acceleration lane, you should be trying to build up your speed to match the speed of lane 1. But of course there is a giveaway line there that most people don't seem to realise and seem to think they just have an automatic right to just drive straight onto the motorway regardless of whether you're there or could even move over. with good forward planning, you could see the traffic coming down the slip road or the acceleration lane, and if space and time, you should plan to move over if you can. But I'll tell you what, if it's heavily congested, it's not always easy to do. But then
Yeah.
I wouldn't not let someone out in front of me. If they've matched my speed, and most people do, then I would let them in. There's no point in fighting. As you said earlier on, and that red mist coming down, you know, what's one car, one truck in front of you over a journey of how far? It doesn't mean anything.
Yeah.
But people get so anxious about it, don't they?
Yeah, it's an interesting point what you've just talked about with the queuing traffic. On the top left-hand side of this picture of the Spaghetti Junction, you can see the queuing traffic there and the cars coming up behind. So that's the sort of thing that we're up against, isn't it? Yeah, coming up the motorway slip.
I mean, a lot of them now, they have, around our way, and you probably got them there as well, they have these traffic lights that try and slow the traffic. But we've got one here that if you blink on green, it'll be back to red. If you're not in gear and got the biting point, you never get through. It changes that fast. It's nuts. I don't see the point. I actually don't see the point of them at all, personally. I can't, you know, it doesn't do anything. But there you are. The better motorway system is the American system, where you can just drive straight on and you automatically have your own lane, and you come off automatically in your own lane. You're not this bargy trying to get into lane 1 and straight across into lane 4. And it is a lot safer, but then they've got the space and we haven't.
Yeah, I think that's the big thing, isn't it? Yeah, it's the space that they've got over there. It is quite weird though when you can overtake in any lane, whether you're in whichever lane you're in, you can pass another car. I found that one quite strange when the first time I went to America and I was sat on a bus watching this.
Yeah.
Different.
But that's where smart motorways or active motorways with those speed cameras, the traffic in lane 2 or even lane 3 or however many lanes could start losing momentum, and everything's sort of moving along, and it's quite normal to be going up the inside of things. Just always be very careful if there is a juggernaut or LGV in lane 2 or in lane 1 and you're running on the hard shoulder, which you're allowed to do. Just be very careful going up the inside of them. And I always point out to my students that most collisions happen at motorway junctions, where people leave it extremely late to change lanes, or they get confused, or they go off and come back on, or worse than that, and we've seen the footage of it, they start reversing.
Yeah. Jackie's just brought in a point here, which I actually remember us talking about last night when we were on the phone. There's no speed limit on motorways in Germany. I know Jackie used to live over there and work in Germany, so she's used to driving on the German autobahns, except where the local authorities set a speed limit. However, drivers can still be fined for speeding if they drive at a speed that's not suitable for prevailing conditions, i.e. heavy traffic. So something to bear in mind if anybody does know anybody that, pupils that are going to go live abroad, go to different areas. So that's something worth bearing in mind, especially if they're in Germany with the autobahns. It's worth talking about that sort of condition.
You mentioned driving in Italy. You drive on the autostrada in Italy, and you'll be being flashed by BMWs doing 120 miles an hour about a quarter of a mile away from you.
Yeah, definitely.
And they will come up behind you and be about 2 foot off your bumper, or in metric, probably 60 centimetres, at over 100 miles an hour. Quite daunting. If you're not an experienced driver, that is quite intimidating.
It is.
We were doing 120 in Germany and being overtaken by BMWs. I must stress, it was clear, sunny day. There was, and very, very light traffic, but staggering to see these vehicles overtaking you when you're doing 120 miles an hour. So,
it's completely different driving. Yeah. Right. Okay. So moving on from that. Overtaking. Just a bit of a recap, really, because the last webinar that we did was about overtaking, so I'm not going to really go on too much on this one, but it's just making very good assessment of the traffic approaching from behind, as Nick's just said, especially if you're abroad. Watch out for the flashing headlights, because abroad and in France they use the right-hand indicator or the left-hand indicator quite a bit to warn you that they're wanting to overtake. So different countries have a... Sorry?
Yes, sorry, it's same in Italy. They'll keep they'll keep that indicator on when they're in the outside lane to say they want to pass you.
Yeah.
But the nice thing is there, to be honest, their lane discipline is better than ours. They will always move over, let you by, and if necessary, they'll move back. Whereas here, we'll start flashing the brake lights, slowing down. I don't know where our mentality comes from, but there you go.
So it is worth taking note that different countries do have different approaches to the use of some of the indicators and flashing headlights when you're driving. One thing for overtaking, something that I talk about quite a bit, is where we have around our area a lot of intersections where the A1 meets the M1 and then it meets the A64. We've a lot of road widening, road narrowing. So it's looking forward and planning well up ahead. If you're going to be overtaking, watching for the traffic that's doing quite a considerable speed down the right-hand lane, or lane 3, 4, 5, which we have around us, and then suddenly realising they want to be in lane 1 to go off to the A64. And then they cut across 4 lanes of motorway. So when you're overtaking, especially if you're coming on in lane 1, watch out for the traffic coming across the lanes. Don't want to meet them in the middle. Anticipate the movement, as I've just been saying, lane 3 back to lane 2, and also the other way around when you're moving across. And something we just briefly touched on is when you've overtaken, when should you move back into lane 2 or lane 1? Because you see a lot of cars now, especially with the lane hogging that's just come in, people soon seem to move back in too soon, and then they're moving back out again because they've caught the truck up that's in front of them 50 metres ahead of them. So what I would advise is look behind you, be checking your mirrors, and then if you've got traffic behind that's wanting to overtake, moving in, and I'd get that discussion going with the learners as well, and getting them thinking about when they should move back, and is it worth moving in and out all the time, or should we just stay out and keep going? I don't know how that works. Yeah, go on, Nick.
Just quickly on that. I mean, we're thinking that learners may be allowed on motorways before too long. I mean, you're in lane 1 and they may not be moving very quickly or have the confidence of that. Personally, I'll be taking them on dual carriageways before they venture on the motorway. You've got LGVs steaming up behind them at 60 odd mile an hour on thereabouts. They ain't going to want to be slowing down. So some of these learners could get swamped by very, very heavy trucks, and not all British trucks as well. I'm not decrying foreign truck drivers, but statistically they do have a little bit more prangs than what the British truck drivers do for a variety of reasons that we won't go into now. So very serious to think about all this. And if you've ever done dual carriageway work with your learners, how many of them, when they go to change lanes, lift off the gas?
Yes.
Don't they?
Yeah.
They lift.
Yeah.
Don't lift, because you're about to overtake. You lift off, you won't catch the guy in front. So that's something that if you haven't done that before, you need to be very aware that they do lift from the gas pedal.
And the other thing is they can do the opposite as well. If they're watching the mirrors and they're trying to look at the traffic that's coming and work out where they're overtaking, quite often you find that they catch the car in front as well. They don't maintain a safe gap from in front. So it's just watching that. That's moving.
Do we only have 2 minutes left?
I'm moving on, Lynn. Moving on. Just something to be aware of, especially passing HGVs or where there's high hedges and everything. Be aware if there's strong winds coming across the motorway, where you get the windbreaks, the gaps between hedges, or you start to overtake an HGV, you can end up snaking a little bit. So it's a good one to go through. And just very briefly,
if you went on the M4 and went across the Severn Bridge, that can be shut sometimes in strong winds.
Yes, yeah, we have the Humber Bridge that closes quite regularly. Down to Lynn and Nick, I'm just going to go through some of the questions, see if there's any questions, but I'll leave this one to you two and the next slide. Just give me a prompt when you want the slide moving on.
Okay, so
Okay.
talking about breakdowns, I don't think we've actually got time to do it as a poll question. So I'm going to remind you that we shouldn't actually be using warning triangles on the motorway. The reason behind that was that it's just far too dangerous to get out and actually be walking back to place it back. It used to be 50 meters behind the vehicle. It's too dangerous to do that. It could also get blown onto the motorway. So the advice now is not to use the warning triangle. Turn your wheels to the left. Leave by the left door. Don't open right doors. Leave pets inside the vehicle, but do get out and get away from the motorway whenever you can. Use the roadside phones and follow the arrows to the nearest 1 mile intervals. It's really important to teach your pupils all about this, just in case they do break down. When you are face traffic.
Yeah, Lynn, a good question to ask a student is how far, what's the furthest you'd have to walk to the motorway phone? And that's an interesting one because, of course, it's only half a mile is the furthest you'd ever have to walk. But because it's a mile apart, they seem to think it might be a mile. And I'd say to them, well, just turn around and look behind you then.
Don't forget that disabled drivers will put a print up in the car, which is a signal to show that they are disabled. If we notice them having a discussion about this, whether the safest thing to do is actually go up to the next service area and come off and report to the motorway police that there was somebody that was disabled and stranded. Whether you'd feel you'd want to pull your car up ahead of theirs or behind it and get out to help is another matter as to how safe you think that would be. I think that's
just on breakdowns, I've got a question that'll fit in with this one.
Right.
What advice would you give if you broke down and stopped in the third lane so you could get across to the hard shoulder?
The only time anything like that, it wasn't on a motorway, it was on the dual carriageway, and I was in the outside lane and I had a puncture. I did try to get it back over across to what was then more like a hard shoulder area that I could stop in. It's not great to be stopped in the outside lane, is it? I think you'd need to try and get yourself back across if it's safe.
This actually happened to my wife
right.
About 18 months ago. She actually broke down in lane 3. The car wouldn't stop, wouldn't move.
Okay.
It just completely died. And she rang me up, what shall I do? I said, get out of the car on the right-hand side near the barrier. And I said, when there's a safe gap, get yourself across the road and leave the car. So it's a question of just getting out of there, because if that car gets hit and you're in it, I'm afraid you're a goner. And that's the same as wherever you are on whichever motorway. Get the point across to the pupil that's driving, get them out, passengers out by the left door if you're on the hard shoulder, and leave the pets in the car, because the pets can be dangerous if they're left and not controlled to get across the motorway.
Yeah.
I can always buy another budgie.
Yeah. So that was that one. Business sense, just very quickly, because
we're just important to do motorway training if you can, and try and sell it as a package. Maybe even train more than one pupil at a time, so that you've put a group of 2 or 3 friends and stop at a service area and maybe let the next one take over. Think outside the box a bit. You don't have to do it as a one-to-one necessarily. And as you said, Ed, you can put groups of time together to do it as well.
Yeah, 3 to 1. Yeah. The other thing that I've heard of people doing is charging a higher lesson rate and then doing free motorway lessons post-test. So people have already prepaid.
I charge more for motorway tuition.
Yeah.
But what it's saying is add on £1 or 2 more, and then when they pass their driving test, you can say, right, you've paid for this effectively, so have the motorway lesson, because I'll do it free, but in theory you've paid, and if they don't want it, you've made extra money whichever way. So
yeah definitely.
I always stress very much how important the motorway is to my students, and the problem is if they don't do it within the first 2 weeks, usually they're not going to do it, because you'll ring them up and say, we're going on the motorway, I've already been, and because they survived and got home, they seem to think they're fine.
Yeah, their experience is that. Yeah. Just very quickly, one last thing, and I'm going to go through all the questions because time has really gone on tonight. It's 4 minutes past 9 now, so I'm just going to close off with this one. This is quite a good website, Highways England website, where they have useful movies showing how to use smart motorways. Thanks, Dave Harris, for bringing that one up. Quite a lot of useful information on there from Highways England. So that's a good reference for everybody to go to. We'll have a look through all the questions, and if there's any on there that need answering, we'll get back to you with those questions with an answer. Have you guys got anything else that you want to add about motorways?
No, just to tell people what we might be doing next time, Ed.
Yeah. Next webinar is on Tuesday the 24th of January. It's a week earlier. We usually have it on the last Tuesday of January, but we're planning a skiing holiday for that, so I wouldn't be here to run the webinar. So it's going to be Tuesday the 24th of January at 8 o'clock. Pits and Pets. Go on, Lynn. What's Pits and Pets? Very briefly.
Oh, well, we don't need people to
entice one or two
performance
people.
interfering thoughts and performance enhancing thoughts in people's minds, which can hold them back or actually help them to go forward. So it's a part of coaching, really, again.
Lovely. Thank you for that. And thank you to everybody that's joined us this evening. Thank you very much, everybody. And the webinar will be going up onto the ADNJC website for free viewing for a while, and then it'll go into the archive, which is available for members. So it'll be there until after Christmas. Obviously, we're having a Christmas break here because the last one would be the sort of week of the end of December. So have a good Christmas, everybody. Thank you for joining us through this year.
Thanks very much. See you in the new year.
Thank you very much for joining us. Good night, everyone.
Bye. Bye-bye.